It was a crisp autumn morning when Sophia checked into the Golden Orchid, one of the most luxurious hotels in the city. The five-star establishment was known for hosting the wealthiest individuals, business tycoons, celebrities, and royalty. Its grand lobby sparkled with chandeliers, marble floors, and fresh flowers arranged in ornate vases. A haven of extravagance. But for Sophia, this was just another stop on her unassuming travel schedule. Dressed in a simple, tailored white blouse and comfortable black slacks, Sophia could have easily blended into any crowd. Her outfit, although elegant, was modest and practical. She didn't wear much jewelry, just a single gold necklace, and she carried a well-worn leather handbag slung over her shoulder. If anyone bothered to look closely, they might have noticed her confidence, her grace, and the way she carried herself. But on first glance, to most, she seemed ordinary. As she walked up to the reception desk, the hotel manager, a sharply dressed man in his 40s named Paul, glanced at her. His eyes scanned her briefly, and a slight frown formed on his lips. She wasn't the type of guest he was used to dealing with in a place like this. Without missing a beat, he directed her to the side with a wave of his hand. "Yes, the maid service desk is over there," Paul said curtly, barely making eye contact. Sophia blinked, momentarily confused. Maid service? She looked at the direction he pointed toward, and then back at him. A couple of guests nearby, checking in, glanced at her with raised eyebrows. She realized what had just happened. He had mistaken her for hotel staff. For a moment Sophia could have corrected him, but something stopped her. She simply nodded, a soft smile playing on her lips, and walked in the direction he had pointed. She could feel the eyes of the hotel staff and other guests on her, but she didn't mind. She had been in situations like this before. People often underestimated her, judged her by her appearance. Little did they know that beneath her simple exterior was a story they couldn't begin to imagine. A few hours later, Sophia made her way to her reserved room, a private suite that overlooked the city skyline. The room was enormous, with plush furniture, gold accents, and a panoramic view of the bustling streets below. As she stood by the window, sipping a glass of water, she heard a knock at the door. When she opened it, a young woman in a hotel uniform stood there, holding a tray of fresh towels. Her eyes widened when she saw Sophia in the lavish suite. "Oh, I'm sorry," the maid stammered, clearly flustered. "I must have the wrong room." "No, it's all right," Sophia replied kindly. "You're in the right place. Please come in." The maid hesitated, confused. "But you were downstairs earlier, near the maid's desk." Sophia chuckled softly. "Yes, I suppose I was." The maid, not wanting to intrude further, quickly placed the towels down and scurried out, still perplexed. Later that evening, the hotel's grand dining hall buzzed with activity. The Golden Orchid's restaurant was famous for its Michelin-starred chef and world-class menu, attracting an elite clientele. Sophia walked in, taking a seat at one of the tables near the window. She had booked a table for one, content to enjoy her meal alone and admire the view. As she sat waiting for her food, Paul, the hotel manager, made his way around the dining room, checking in with guests, ensuring everything was up to the hotel's impeccable standards. When he spotted Sophia sitting alone, his brow furrowed once again. What was she doing here? He wondered if she had somehow wandered into the restaurant by mistake. It didn't fit the image of their typical guest. Without hesitation, Paul approached her, his tone polite but firm. "Excuse me, ma'am. Are you dining alone tonight? May I assist you in finding your seat?" Sophia looked up at him, her expression calm. "No, I'm perfectly fine here, thank you." Paul paused, not entirely convinced. He had never seen this woman before, and her simple attire didn't seem to match the usual crowd. But before he could inquire further, a man entered the restaurant, and everything changed. The man who had just walked in was Mr. Caldwell, the owner of the Golden Orchid and several other luxury hotels around the world. He was well known in high society for his wealth and influence, and when he entered the room, heads turned. The staff stood a little straighter, the diners whispered among themselves, and Paul immediately moved to greet him. "Mr. Caldwell, welcome, sir," Paul said, a wide smile plastered on his face. "How can we assist you this evening?" But Mr. Caldwell wasn't paying attention to the manager. His eyes were fixed on Sophia, who was still sitting quietly by the window. Paul noticed the shift in Caldwell's expression and felt a surge of panic. Why was Mr. Caldwell looking at her? Suddenly, Caldwell walked past Paul, making a beeline straight for Sophia's table. "Sophia!" Caldwell's voice was filled with warmth and admiration. "It's so good to see you again." Paul froze, completely dumbfounded. He watched in disbelief as the wealthy hotel magnate approached this woman, the very one he had mistaken for a maid, and greeted her with the kind of respect reserved for royalty. Sophia stood up and smiled warmly, shaking Mr. Caldwell's hand. "Hello, Richard. It's been a while." The entire dining room fell silent. Waiters stopped mid-step. Guests whispered in shock, and all eyes were on Sophia. No one had ever seen Mr. Caldwell treat someone with such personal regard. Paul, in particular, felt his stomach drop as he realized the magnitude of his mistake. "I had no idea you were staying with us," Caldwell said, pulling out a chair to sit next to her. "You should have told me. I would have arranged something special." Sophia waved off his concern. "I didn't want to cause any fuss, Richard. I'm just here for a short stay." Paul's mind raced, trying to make sense of it all. Who was this woman? How did she know Mr. Caldwell? Over the course of the evening, as the whispers spread like wildfire, the truth about Sophia slowly came to light. Far from being a mere guest, Sophia was, in fact, one of the wealthiest and most influential businesswomen in the country. She was the CEO of a global tech company, a philanthropist, and someone who had worked closely with Mr. Caldwell on several charitable initiatives. She had risen from humble beginnings, building her empire from the ground up, but she had always chosen to remain modest and grounded. For her, wealth was not about flaunting riches or making others feel small. It was about creating opportunities, lifting others up, and staying true to her values. And because she chose not to display her wealth through extravagant clothes or luxury cars, she often found herself underestimated by people who judged her at first glance. Paul, who had treated her with such casual disregard earlier, was now reeling from embarrassment. He felt a deep pit of regret in his stomach. He had judged her, misread her entirely, and now the entire hotel knew it. The next morning, Paul approached Sophia, who was sitting in the hotel's garden, enjoying a cup of coffee. His heart pounded with nerves as he stopped a few feet away from her. "Ms. Sophia," he began, his voice shaky, "I owe you an apology. Yesterday I made a terrible assumption. I didn't know who you were, and I treated you poorly. I'm deeply sorry for that." Sophia looked up at him, her expression calm and understanding. "Paul, it's all right," she said softly. "I'm used to it. People often assume things based on appearances. What matters is what you do when you realize your mistake." Paul nodded, relief flooding through him. "I'm truly sorry. I've learned a valuable lesson." Sophia smiled kindly. "We all have moments of judgment. But remember, kindness and respect should never be reserved for those we think deserve it. Everyone deserves to be treated with dignity, regardless of how they look or what they wear." Her words hung in the air, a powerful reminder that wealth and status don't define a person's worth. The people who judge others by their outward appearance often miss the incredible stories and strength behind their facade. As Sophia prepared to leave the Golden Orchid later that day, The entire staff treated her with newfound respect, not because of her wealth or status, but because they now understood the importance of treating everyone, no matter who they seemed to be, with kindness. Sophia had left a lasting impact, not just on Paul, but on everyone she encountered during her stay. Appearances can be deceiving. The way we treat people when we think they are less than us reveals our true character. Sophia didn't need riches or a fancy title to prove her worth. Her humility and kindness spoke louder than any wealth ever could. Let's remember that every person we encounter has a story, and everyone deserves to be treated with respect, no matter how they look. If you enjoyed this story, YouTube thinks you'll like these stories ASO.